Hello, hello. It is the last Sunday of the month, or it was yesterday. And that means we have a month of Shonen Jump to talk about. It was a pretty exciting month for the magazine. A lot of spicy developments across a lot of series, and two brand new series starting with one finishing. We got a lot to cover. Let's jump right in, starting with these kind of movers and shakers, our beginnings and ends. One of which is pictured here on the cover slide. Clearly, I thought a lot of it. I'm excited to talk about it. But first, let's talk about the series that finished, Hakutaku. In the first issue of the month, had a chapter that right from the start kind of gave me ending vibes. I believe the chapter's title is literally what Hakutaku means, the white desk. And reading it, I thought, okay, this is the end. They made it through kind of one substantial arc, but they couldn't really get the traction, I guess, to keep going. And now we are getting an untimely finale. But as the chapter progressed, suddenly they were like showing off a bunch of character designs and speaking about a whole bunch of roles that they had to fill in for their game development team and all of their aspirations and dreams and everything. And I was like, okay, maybe not. Maybe we're going to just have more adventures. They specifically talk about selling their game at Comiket. It was very exciting for them to actually use Comiket as the name instead of like Kamima or one of the many Wuck style euphemisms that show up in manga. And I was like, oh, sweet, like a Comiket selling arc. That would be phenomenal. I really started to think, yeah, okay, I guess there's a bright future for this series after all. And then, no, just kidding. It actually was the end. One of the stranger endings, I'd say, on the general axes of planned versus unplanned. This definitely feels much more unplanned. It really does seem like they had planned out a lot of this Comiket arc, the future comrades, designing these characters for some reason, certainly not just to show up in one panel in the final chapter. At the same time, on the axis of spiteful to not spiteful, I would say this was pretty not spiteful. They easily could have like rubbed it in the faces of the readers a little more that they were getting axed. Offering more commentary that almost exists on a meta level about all of these characters that we're not going to get to meet. But I was impressed. They seem to just kind of want to show the fruits of their labor and hint at these things that they were planning on doing that unfortunately weren't going to come to pass. Which I think leaves a good impression, an impression of potential and excitement that hopefully will carry forward into the creators' next projects. Shit, I never changed this. I was gonna say, I think this is actually the creators of Shinobi Undercover, which is still running. Anyways, I like this series overall. I really do enjoy this genre of like our heroes launching into a big creative project, exploring all of the trials and tribulations and logistics of said project, the emotional significance having this sort of fulfilling creative endeavor in your life brings to people. I find all of that very moving, very exciting, and if the actual subject matter is interesting, and game development is certainly very interesting to me, all the better. So let's do a little like post mortem here. Let's try to break down why this didn't work in contrast to Bakuman, which is pretty structurally similar. It's about two kids making manga instead of games. But, generally speaking, seemed like it would have the same sort of structures, the same sort of arcs, the same sort of challenges, the same methods of expanding the cast. This certainly would have wanted to have Bakuman's success. Bakuman ran for quite a long time. It was acclaimed and beloved as it ran. And I think it's kind of interesting to figure out, like, why wasn't this Bakuman? Why didn't this work in the same way? I think big ones are they really did spend too much time, in my mind, lingering on, like, the trauma of the characters in order to build kind of like a powerful emotional foundation to why they're doing what they're doing. In Bakuman, they kept it pretty breezy, and they put more of the sort of tragic backstories and stuff on the side characters, and they kind of let that stuff breathe and develop throughout the series. Like the conflict and drama emerged as they found success and as they found moments where they couldn't cooperate, and all of these stumbling blocks that they encountered on the way. They didn't preload all of that stuff. Instead, they made the emotional hook like almost laughably simple, that he has a crush on a girl that wants to be a VA. And so he's like, someday our manga will become an anime and you're going to be the VA for one of the characters, and then we'll get married. They just kind of like throw that out there. It makes like no sense. There's no realistic foundation to it. But that serves as the entire kind of emotional lodestar, where when our character is struggling, when he's wondering what the purpose of all this work is, when he's trying to find motivation to push even harder with his art. It just but remember the girl that's out there waiting for me. And that's enough. You really don't need more than that. And the more time you spend on anything that isn't that, the less substantial you can make the actual subject matter of your manga. Making games, in this case. It felt like we really didn't focus enough on what it actually takes to make games, what's fun about it, what's interesting about it, the feelings you get from making a game. It's a lot of kind of like skipping through that stage. They do a really good job kind of showing the brainstorming, showing how they're being confronted with a problem that they're trying to use a game to solve, whether that be helping some neighborhood kids play without breaking the rules, or promoting a shopping streets festival, or trying to win a competition at a game jam. They do a great job kind of like building up the motivation for the game, and then it always just like skips to the results. Everybody's reception, the positive and negative feedback, the aspirations that build from that. Both of those I think were like well depicted, but they skipped something that it's really crucial, which I think is showing the process itself and making that into like a very compelling, almost like action scene. Action programming, like in crime procedurals where they're typing really fast or something. Because when you think about Bakuman, they really spent a lot of time with just like intense montages of drawing the chapter, and the struggles of like properly inking, and the minutia, the stuff that makes you like really feel like you're in the skin of the characters, that gives you the visceral feeling of accomplishment for actually doing all that hard work. For whatever reason, they just didn't seem to be that interested in depicting this in the manga about video games. Maybe they thought it would be too arcane, it would be too bogged down by technicality to try to explain what it is the characters are doing. Maybe they did think it would be like cheesy to try to make like action-packed typing sequences. But I think something vital is lost if you gloss over that stuff, or just show it too briefly. It just kind of made the whole manga feel unreal, and it made you feel less connected to the actual fruits of their labor. Whereas in something like Bakuman, whenever they were able to finish a project, whenever they were able to start a serialization, you could tell that that was their pride and joy. It became like your pride and joy too. You really wanted to root for its success because you saw the sweat and tears that went into it. And in some occasions, blood. What else? I mean, there's stuff you can point to with like the art and just the general level of skill and professionalism on display. Bakuman, of course, has the legendary artist of such series as Death Note, Platinum End, which is a little less legendary, but somebody that somebody's excited to read the works of no matter what. Here, instead, I'm pretty sure this is their first project, and I think the art style is actually really good and really bold and exciting in some spots, especially in the first chapter. There was a few spreads that really moved me and really got me excited about the potential of the series. But there's nothing so impressive. Like, the characters are not so alluring or cute or cool that you can kind of get by on a fandom of the character itself, whereas I think Bakuman, right from the start, really had that going for it. Here's the cute girl he has a crush on, Boom. Don't you have a crush on her too? Look how cute we made her. Don't you want to see them get married? And as I said, it's simple, but it's like all it takes to just kind of thread in one more emotional hook, which I think this series just didn't have enough of to really grasp people and pull them along for the ride. But yeah, I don't know. I really hope the lesson here isn't don't put these sorts of stories into Jump. I think there is certainly a place for them, and I think it's a great thing for kids to be reading about, you know? All of these awesome creative hobbies you can get into, how hard they are, but then how fulfilling. I think that's a great element to have in the magazine. I just think this one, a little unfocused. Anyways, I did like this ending, though. I appreciate that they tried to kind of keep you excited about the idea of the series, keep you excited about game development, you know, and not just sort of have a downer ending of like, it can get pretty spiteful when series get axed. So yeah, we'll give it an A minus, just solid stuff. Okay, next we'll talk about the two new series that started in February. The first one is Embers, and I was actually very, very excited for this because we haven't had just a straightforward, pure sports manga in Jump in quite a while. I mean, Blue Box is close. Blue Box has excellent, excellent sports scenes when they have sports scenes. We're going to talk about basketball in Blue Lock in a little bit. But it's only half the story. The other half is like a rom-com. And it doesn't really have the pure focus and the level of intensity and strategy and just focus that a pure sports series would have. So I was like, sweet. Soccer, we got this cool dude looking here. Let's see what we got. And what we got is pretty generic, I'm not gonna lie. There was nothing so far that really stood out to me as like, oh, this is the hook, this is the angle. The unique thing, I suppose, is that he's kind of like a delinquent. You can see here he's got his like delinquent jacket slung over his shoulder. But it doesn't really matter too much. The first chapter like speed runs through the entire backstory of this guy in a fashion that I found really, really awkwardly paced, really hurried. Just trying to like as quickly and efficiently as possible be like, okay, he's this kind of guy, you get it? He's the strongest guy, but he's not overly mean. He just fights when he's forced to, but he wins every fight. He's the strongest guy. You got it? You got it? Okay, on to the next thing. He meets a teacher who recognizes his potential in soccer. They start practicing every day. Okay, on to the next one, on to the next one. He puts together a ragtag team of his fellow thugs, and they go to battle against one of the top teams in the multi-school area. Okay. He suffers a crushing defeat, but shows a lot of potential. And it's just like, why are you cramming this all into one chapter? First off, a lot of these things are so cliche, so unsurprising, so routine that you could have just skipped them. You could make it a lot more efficient than this instead of having to show every single scene in this super compressed kind of like unresonant speedrun way. You could just show one scene of him meeting a teacher it's holding a soccer ball. The teacher's holding a soccer ball and says, "Hey kid, you're kind of good at blocking people." Smash cut to he's already out on the field with his ragtag team, right? Like, what was the point of like 3 or 4 pages showing him training? We get it. He trained. Or even better, since it's clear that all of this stuff is just kind of a formality, and the idea is that he's that kind of guy. He's really tough and gritty. He's not, formally trained from a young age. Instead, he just sort of channeled his fighting skills into soccer. That has potential. So why not start the series with him in a game, and you show how kind of rough and tumble he is. You show how kind of unrefined he is about other soccer fundamentals. And then you have this moment where maybe somebody on the opposite team recognizes, like, what is this guy's deal? How did he learn to play soccer like that? And then you just have, like, very suggestive short flashbacks, starting in media res, if you've ever heard that term before. I think it could have been a lot more compelling and just kind of get to the meat a lot faster. Because after that first chapter, which was just a speed run through all of this unnecessary establishing stuff, Then we get another chapter that's just entirely a speed run of setting up the next thing. Okay, well, now he's in high school and he wants to play soccer, so he went to the school with a really good soccer team and he's going to try out, but they're skeptical because he doesn't have a formal background and he's really aggressive looking and scary and he freaks people out and blah, 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 blah. Just kind of trying to cram in like every single scene that you might need to see, even though you've probably seen it before. And then chapter 3 as well, it like establishes a bunch of the other characters that are presumably going to be on his team. They talk about the tryout process and everything. They set up this whole scenario where it's like how he's going to have to prove himself. And again, there was one thing I kind of liked, one thing that was kind of interesting about this guy that was like judging people's strength by their handshake. I thought, okay, well, that's kind of interesting, you know, it's something that isn't in every other single sports manga. But again, it just kind of felt like we got to do it. You don't got to do it. And if you really feel like you got to do it, you can do it a lot faster than this. And then finally on chapter 4, after all of that, we get an actual like soccer action where the majority of the chapter is in the meat of a soccer game. They're talking about tactics, they're talking about different characters' skill sets, they're talking about general soccer strategy and trying to impart it to the MC. And I was like, okay, now the series is finally started. Now they're getting to the point that they actually wanted to write and that everything else was just obligatory, they felt, to get to that point. So very, very frustrating on that front. But when they got into the meat of the soccer, I was like, all right, this could be good. Now it's a sports manga. Hopefully we won't have any other more tedious, unnecessary stuff. Oh, I'm sure he's going to have a sad flashback at some point, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Probably everybody else is going to have a sad flash. We gotta stop writing sad flashbacks. I don't care. Look at Blue Lock. Every single character in Blue Lock got like viciously beaten by their parents and left out into the streets to die like a dog. And that makes you good at soccer, I guess. And each one is like more unbearably brutal and grim than the last one. Why do we start writing sports manga like this, man? Read Eye Shield. You know who has a sad backstory in Eye Shield? Like, sort of Himura, but his backstory is more just like crazy and fun. And you know who else even has a backstory period? Like 3 characters have like a half chapter one each. That's all you need. You don't need to do all this. Who told you to do all this? Whose fault is it? Anyways, I'm gonna say though, all in all, it's like fine. I'll give it a B. It's very, very generic. Nothing really is interested happening yet. But it doesn't have to be something crazy unique. It just has to be good. And now that we're into the actual soccer gameplay, I think there's potential. So we'll see. We'll see. Okay, you want to talk about potential, though. You want to talk about something crazy. You want to talk about something very unique in the hallways of Jump. Let's talk about Star of Beethoven. What the hell is this? It's a manga about a depressed pianist who had left playing semi-professionally on the road to a professional career, who is visited by a man claiming to be the reincarnation of Ludwig von Beethoven, you know, often considered the goat of all competition or composition, the great innovator of the Romantic era, one of the most major turning points in musical composition, period. It is hard to imagine modern music without the long chain of influence started by Beethoven himself. A man that carries a lot of gravitas and weight thrown into this absurd scenario where now living in modern Japan, stumbling around, unable to speak Japanese, unable to understand any modern technology or modern society or anything, encounters this kid and decides that he needs to inspire him to the return to the piano. This is the actual premise of a manga that they are running in Weekly Shonen Jump. And what's funny is that this isn't even the only piano-themed manga of recent years. A few years ago, we had PPPPPP, a manga about a family of piano savant brothers, and the one brother who like doesn't have talent, but then kind of secretly does have talent. That was another really weird manga, and it didn't last a whole long time, but maybe lasted longer than you would imagine. I think it lasted almost an entire year. I liked okay. I thought the art style was weird in a compelling way that I really hadn't seen in Jump before. Same with like the page composition and stuff. I didn't like that the piano playing itself got turned into like magic, basically, where, you know, a common trope in anime and manga is that when somebody is playing music, other characters like vividly hallucinate some scene that is invoked by the music. Wow, it feels like I'm in a flowery orchid meadow, whatever. Oh, it feels like I'm on the beach. It feels like I'm on a roller coaster. This one takes that idea to like an absurd degree where everyone in the audience is like seeing the same thing, and it's just like a fact of the reality of the series that music makes you hallucinate. And then they talk about different compositions and different people's playing techniques and stuff, by being like, well, this guy invokes the feeling of being at a carnival, but then he switched up his playing, so now it feels like the carnival is closing and you're going home after the carnival. And it's just weird to me because it doesn't really have anything to do with music at all at that point. Like, the actual discussion of what the music could possibly sound like to invoke this becomes very, very secondary. And then the whole plot structure seemed really weird to me too. Okay, but that's enough about PvP. That was kind of the expectation I had going into this series. It is very, very different. The way it treats music is very different. It's very focused on actual specific pieces by Beethoven and others, and features of those pieces, what made them so notable, what makes them challenging to play, what do audiences appreciate when they hear them, not in some vague, overly poetic terms, but just like on the sort of technical skills that are on display, the emotional journey it takes you on, getting down to the music theory level of like how those things work. Not to any like crazy depth. I hope it'll keep going in that direction, but in a way that I found like genuinely interesting, and in a way that like actually reflects like music, how music actually works. The whole character of Beethoven, this intense, boisterous man who just wanders around kicking down doors and screaming, is so much fun. I was really impressed that they found a way to have this like the demotivated main character. His backstory is a mystery only for the first chapter, and then you learn all of it in the span of the second chapter, and it's like good and it makes sense and it's interesting, and then it's like he's cured. He wants to play the piano again. Now he has to make up for lost time. Now he has to get back on the road to a true professional. And it's like, what a amazing like tone to set for the series, one of like redemption and hope and pushing yourself towards greater and greater heights. You know, a lesser series, and I think PBBB to an extent did this, would have wallowed in his motivational issues for like volumes on end. There would have been so much like trauma and confusion and self-doubt. No. What's the point of all that? Is that fun? Is that exciting? This exciting, non-gloomy tone that the series just bellows forth with on all fronts. It's so good. The paneling is good. The art style is so crazy and unique. I have no idea where it could go. I think basically the route that makes the most sense and that I would be totally content with is he just achieves greater and greater heights with the piano. He has some rivals. This whole situation with the reincarnated Beethoven, of whom he still has overwhelming doubts of the authenticity of. He does not think that's actually Beethoven. Understandable. Eventually he comes to appreciate this guy truly is a genius. Maybe it doesn't even matter whether or not he's Beethoven. Some sort of scandals. It's almost like Hikaru no Go, to have this legend at your back, but this totally inexplicable scenario. There's a lot of potential already sitting on the table, but it's just such a strange and unique series that I feel like it could go in like 80 other directions. I don't know. This one's nuts. I'm giving it an A+. Fantastic start. I want to see more. I am so skeptical that this will survive in Jump. I think if this manages to get a fan base going and lasts a year, I'll be really happy. I'm kind of predicting more like 4 months, but we'll see. We'll see. Okay, let's talk about some ongoing series and what has happened recently, starting with Witch Watch. Witch Watch is fully in fun mode versus plot mode, and I couldn't be happier. We just got 4 very straightforward sitcom-y chapters, but I really appreciate how each of them kind of went in different emotional directions, had different subject matter, and had a different kind of like style of humor. So the first one, they all get turned into t-shirts by some sort of spell, and the t-shirt designs reflect their current feelings, and to fix this and to turn them back into humans, they have to be worn by someone who matches the overall image of the shirt design with their personality. That's just a great premise because it's so stupid because it makes like no sense and raises like 1,000 more questions than it answers. But they just had like a nice steady stream of gags around this, character humor, fashion humor. It's one that feels like it really rewards having built up all of these character moments over this long run of chapters. Great stuff. The second one focuses on the mangaka character who's trying to get serialized. Just one of the dozens of recurring plot lines in the series. In this one, she's trying to write a series that's mostly about women versus her more hyper-masculine battle stuff that was all doujinshi of... it's too complicated to explain. Anyway, she's trying to draw women, but all she can do is draw fan service, and she just can't help herself. The pen moves on its own. And this leads to a lengthy discussion about how much fan service can you get away with in shonen magazines these days, and how has that changed? Which I found very interesting as this kind of self-appointed historian of Jump. You know, way back in the day, you could see nipples in Jump. You could see penises. They didn't really, you know, they weren't really meant to elicit arousal to any extent. Even the boobs, they were more just like gag comedy boobs than like real tantalizing boobs. But that slowly transitioned into an era of, I would say, more fan service focus as like the ecchi rom-com started to grow in popularity, even as actual nudity started to taper off and the amount of raw skin you were able to show has actually been shrinking bit by bit. And of course, the sort of modern banner carrier for this, the person who is always testing these limits and then exceeding them in tankobon versions or spin-offs in other magazines, is Yabuki Sensei. Yabuki Sensei, who did like Black Cat, To Love Ru, Ayakashi Triangle, maybe some others. Those are the big 3. And there was like an anecdote where in To Love Ru, he had drawn this very scandalous bathhouse scene, and his editor told him, hey, we gotta steam this up a bit. We can't be showing this much in the bathhouse. And he was like, sure, do what you need to do. And then he apparently said, is something on fire? That so much of the page was covered. Just really funny. It's like, this is more the territory of like Roboco or something, but maybe the subject matter is a little mature for the Roboco audience. So I just really found that interesting. I just love any sort of behind the scenes stuff from Jump. Anyways, in the 3rd chapter of this month, the spell that turns everybody into little kids, and now the Nico, who is growing up at her own accelerated pace after being little kidified herself dozens of volumes ago, is babysitting them. And I thought this was a fun chapter too. Again, just kind of like banking on what we know about the characters and this sort of new scenario that we see them in. But it had a nice kind of like stages of life feeling. I think it's kind of cool that they're using... at first I was like, oh, the little kidification of Nico. They want that Spy Family money. A lot of series seem to be going for like the cute little kid character angle. But no, it's much more of a like stages of life comedy type thing. What are the different kind of hallmarks of each stage of life and how can we incorporate that into sitcom kind of humor. The last chapter was an excellent example of that. My favorite chapter of the month was trying to stage the play of Momotaro for Nico's like grade 5 class, but anticipating angry parents claiming that their kid didn't get enough time or that the story is too dated or too violent or whatever. Momotaro goes woke, and the teacher makes all of these absurd changes to accommodate the demands of every single child and every single parent. It's extremely goofy, extremely funny, just packed with little jokes and gags and everything. Great chapter. Everything I love about this series represented in this month. Gets an A plus again. Still killing it. Still love Witch Watch. Anime coming soon. Check it out. Next, we'll talk about Kill Blue, which had a really weird month. I thought it might be ending. It seemed like it was really coming close to the end. Noren found out that Ogami was a hitman, and he defeats the principal, who was like the big bad antagonist. And it seems like everything was gonna like come out in the open, and they were going to stop all the threats to Noren and then be able to like live happily or something. Like, there's definitely some stuff that'd be resolved, but it seemed like all of the pieces were in place. We were gonna move towards the ending. And I was like, wow, that seems like very abrupt and sudden. We talked about this last month as well, that it really quickly shifted gears. The series in general, I think, has an issue of just like leaping from one mode to another far too abruptly in a way that feels more jarring than exciting or interesting. This was just another aspect of that. And then it did it again, right? When it felt like we were building up to the finale, the principal was like, okay, well, we're not going to fight to the death anymore, but I'm going to go back to the challenges, the like multi-genre, multi-threat method of trying to convince you to give up Noren. What? So like it didn't matter at all. The only thing that mattered is that Noren found out Ogami was a hitman and that they were going to like get fake engaged instead of just fake dating. And it's like, does that really matter? And then it's like, oh, I'm gonna go meet your dad because now I'm your fiance. And it's like, is that gonna matter? Like, why did we do all of that? It really kind of felt like maybe ratings were slipping, or the editor was like, we can't just do another challenge. We got to make something a little spicier here. And then they were like, okay, well, let's have a big fight to the death for a bit. And then just be like, it didn't matter. I will say, though, my pet theory that Noren is also an adult that got de-aged, still alive. Bit by bit, I feel like they're foreshadowing this. And another one is that they go and meet her dad, and I think they made her dad very ambiguously aged, that he could be the parent of like a 30-year-old. He doesn't necessarily have to be the parent of a high schooler or middle schooler or whatever the hell they are. So I was like, okay, I think they intentionally made the dad look like that. So that's my big insight. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the hell the series is doing. I will say, though, I don't mind it. It's certainly been worse in the past. It certainly felt stupider in the past. I would rather, I think, this kind of strange, discombobulated story where at least they are making an attempt for things to matter and making an attempt for things to be kind of exciting and evolving and dynamic than just an arc that feels dumb and pointless from day one that we just have to trudge through for months. So yeah, I think this is one of the better modes of the series. Just having shit happen and characters freak out. But it could get even better. They need to lock it into gear, man. Fujimaki, I know you've had hits before. You can make this a hit again. Speaking of, another very successful mangaka that lately has been not even totally stumbling, but I wouldn't say really compelling me in Jump. Wakui Sensei's Astro Royale, in the middle of a big tournament arc where they just seem to be bored by the concept of doing a tournament arc, where they don't really seem to think that the fights themselves will be compelling, and so there always has to be kind of like extra stuff happening in the audience, or like bombshell revelations getting thrown around, or additional stakes. I think twice now it's been like, okay, well, you can't fight me because I kidnapped your sister. Or somebody else's sister. And then in the crowd, boom! I saved his sister. Now you can fight. Hasn't that happened like twice in this arc? Like basically the exact same way? Am I crazy? I guess like not. It was kind of like the same one twice. But it's just not really compelling, not really interesting. The fights themselves feel very distracted, very disjoint, and not really that much interesting is happening in them either. And all of these kind of lore bombshells, I was the one that killed that. It wasn't just poison. So now I'm the most evilest. Even though the other brothers did stuff to make them seem like the most evilest, I'm the true most evilest. How are you going to top that? You know, like that sort of like sudden, fairly arbitrary escalation to try to make it feel like there's more stakes in this kind of feels more transparent too. I will say though, like, it's all fine. It does kind of feel like maybe they're starting the speed run towards the end, just kind of throwing in all these bombshells and compressing a whole bunch of different story concepts into this one tournament arc. It's at least it's exciting. Like, a lot of stuff is happening, and not that much stupid stuff is happening. More just kind of uninteresting stuff is happening. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have all that much to say to it. As I said, it's just not that interesting right now, but it's not bad either. It's just kind of going through the motions. It makes me wonder, like, why did you bother having a tournament arc? Like, is this... You've read Dragon Ball, you've read One Punch Man, you've read One Piece. You know what fun a tournament arc can be as an opportunity to throw in all sorts of wacky characters that don't need to have a backstory, that don't need to have justification, that don't need to have story significance. It's an opportunity to like indulge in your wildest creative designs. But I think this series has always struggled in actually coming up with like interesting powers for the characters or interesting personalities. And so it's just a very poor fit that they're not really rising to the occasion of. We'll give it a B though. Just like Kill Blue, it's like none of the stuff is like bad per se. It's just also not that great. So it lands squarely in the B zone. Oh, I forgot to animate this. Always at least once I forget to animate frickin' something. Yeah, really loving the series. As the score indicates, I continue to love it. We had some like really keynote chapters this month as the Black Parade itself spills out into the city and the demonic hordes appear. I think the spreads showing the demons raining down upon the city and the appearance of the demon lords. Really, really excellent stuff. This is a series that does delight in interesting character designs and interesting powers, interesting personalities. And they've wisely leaned into an arc like this, where there's this mass invasion and then a mass resistance, to show off a lot of really great designs back to back to back. Have a bunch of different cool fights going on at the same time. They've managed to capture like the feeling of chaos on a battlefield, where a whole lot of different fights are happening. They're kind of interfering with each other. Characters are running around to support one another. All sorts of small incidents are cropping up and needing to be resolved. That's really tough to do. I think that's a really tall order in writing, like a battle shonen, to have this sense of like a large scale war that doesn't just feel scattered, doesn't just feel disjoint, that has this kind of continuous energy, this continuous drumbeat and rhythm to it. And they're doing a really great job. What I'm worried about though, what I'm really worried about is this the end? Is this the finale arc? I think the series is doing like fine, but not amazing. It got the Oda recommendation bump, but maybe that's already petered out. It seemed like before they were content to take their time with like training arc, and then they made the very exciting choice of being like, hey, the demon lord he fought, that's only one of 13 demon lords. It's actually one of the weakest ones. There's so much left to do. And then it's like, oh, actually, all the demon lords are invading in this battle. So it's like, oh, well, does this not just kind of take care of everything then? And there's like some other side plot lines, like with the demon Joe Jack and his human ally, where they very efficiently, not even in a bad way, but I think they really ticked off the box of like the arc of that character. And I was like, well, that's another thing they don't have to do later, which again is making me worry that they were told, okay, you can have your big Black Parade finale and then wrap it up. So we'll see. We'll see. I think they also have an option though, where they can be like, well, the whole thing with the Black Parade is that they can only invade for a set amount of time. So all we have to do is fend them off, and then they go away, and then they become scary villains that will recur later. So they do have that out. They do have a little escape hatch in 2 more chapters. And I just hope they choose it. I really enjoy this series. I just love the art style. I love the way they do fights. I love all the character designs. Like, we need more. This month gave us a whole lot of more, and I hope it's not that was it. So yeah, good stuff. We'll give it an A+. We'll look forward to more. Hopefully a lot more. But I will say this, if this is the end, and they're wrapping it up in like 40 chapters or something, that's not a terrible run. That's a better run than a lot of series get. And I think they managed to, even in that short time, carve out a really exciting finale arc, which is probably the hardest thing to do with a series that's kind of under the axe, is to give yourself the space and give yourself enough planning to have like a grand finale, which I think is very earned and so far is very well delivered. I just hope it isn't actually the grand finale. All right, let's talk about RuriDragon. Only 1 chapter this month, as is the case, but it was a good one. I appreciate the series, which is mostly about navigating like awkward social situations, is never content to be like, oh, okay, Ruri figured it out. Now she's good. Now she's a socially capable, well-adjusted person. A person/dragon. No. And it's sort of like when you close one... What am I trying to say? It's like whack-a-mole, I guess is the better analogy. That as soon as she's kind of knocked down one problem, another one crops up. This chapter was mostly focused around her suddenly being very self-conscious that, she'd already kind of dealt with this idea of people bullying her because she's half-dragon, or being afraid of her, being grossed out by her, all these, like, negative emotions. She'd kind of sorted through that, but now she's extremely self-conscious that people are also treating her extra nice because of the dragon thing, and that not really knowing how to handle her, they overcompensate to kindness and invitation and openness, which she suddenly feels is very fake and very forced and transparent and makes her uncomfortable. And that leads to a confrontation with a character that she had previously been getting along with quite well. And I was like, damn, that's pretty real. Like, I think this really captures kind of an element of the teenage psyche, which is that you are just in a bad mood because of puberty and because of rampant hormonal imbalance, putting aside even the Jure conification. And so even when things are good with a particular person and you're getting along and like some aspect of your lifestyle is fine, you find a way to make that problematic. and I think it's like a good one too. Like, it doesn't feel forced. It's just like consistent with the sort of thing you would fixate on. It's not that it isn't real, it's just that you have become fixated on it to an extent that is not healthy and not helpful. That is, I think, puberty all over. Take it from me, somebody that's gone through it twice and got hit with that repeatedly both times. I think this captures it very, very well. And then at the end, a little fun dragon adventure emerges as she just completely bursts into flames. So we'll see what that's about next month, hopefully. But for now, we'll give it a B+. Solid stuff. Just wish there was more, you know? I'm very, very happy that this manga was so beloved and well received, that they switched it to the digital jump and gave them a cadence of whenever the hell you feel like it. I think it's a great manga that deserves that sort of freedom. But at the same time, I'm like, bro, I'm gonna be like 70, and Ruri's gonna be graduating high school, and she'll have like wings by then. I'm gonna tell my grandkids about Ruri. Whatever. Okay. Ichi the Witch is it's becoming a weird one. At first I was like, damn, this is a series that gets it. This is a series that knows what it wants to be as a manga. A fantasy world with like a fairly substantial fantasy mechanical system where we go around the world hunting magics and have to use a wide range of both magic skills, hunting skills, and straight up combat skills to subdue different creatures. And I was like, great, ship it, give me 400 chapters. That sounds awesome. The art is great, the characters are great, the humor is funny, the action is actiony. Fantastic. And then I think in response to some reader disappointment and just generally people like kind of everybody kind of pulling the series in different directions with their expectations, which is, I suppose I was doing too. But mine was the real one. Mine, I am still convinced that my vision of how the series would proceed is how it would proceed in the absence of all reader feedback. But that's not the world of Jump. You know, for better or worse, the dynamics of Jump are super fast, super exaggerated, super dynamic. Series are constantly getting feedback. Series are constantly evolving to suit readers' tastes. If something is panned, it's chopped out unceremoniously. If something is beloved, it is exaggerated until they're on every cover. We've seen it happen a million times, and honestly, I wouldn't want it any other way. It's just so interesting to kind of study these dynamics, to feel emotionally impacted by them, to sometimes be on the side of the reader majority, to sometimes be far away on the opposite side, you know, to try to infer how the creator's intent, the editor's intent, and the reader's intent are all kind of swirling together and influencing each other. So it is what it is. I'm not going to say I'm not disappointed with kind of the direction the series seems to be going in, especially with just this constant teasing and subverting of the actual main hunting dynamic. We were supposed to go on a mushroom hunt. It was supposed to be a super talented mage versus Ichi's own instincts in sniffing out mushrooms. No, just kidding. That's actually about the apocalyptic world eater magic. That didn't matter. We're moving past it. Annoying. And now, we'll talk about some stuff in the middle, but we end up going on this adventure to hunt a spider magic. And I'm like, sweet, okay, it's going to be, again, what sort of magical solution exists as present, and then what is Ichi's edge using his hunting skills and his knowledge of spiders that will give him an advantage, that will make the situation work out. It's the formula that they promised. But no, as soon as they get there, the whole thing is cut short. Quite literally, some dude is there. It's going to be about him now. They're not freaking hunting anything. It's all humans. Human and human-looking things. I don't know. It is what it is. In the middle was some also kind of strange stuff around Descara's pictured character here signing a family bond contract with Ichi, which I kind of like in theory. I felt like kind of a substantial character moment and just sort of an affirmation that, yeah, this is kind of our main crew, these two and the reporter witch lady. These are the people that are going to be having adventures, you know. This is happening in concert with the setup of this prophecy that we're, you know, this prophetic magic is helping them survive the world eater magic by giving them clues and stuff. And I was like, sweet, okay, we're building up the formula again. We're getting into what I'm hoping for this series, what's going to work. But the tone was just so weird that at once it was like sentimental, and then it was like, oh, Ichi got tricked into just kind of being her servant. But then it's like, oh, but actually it was really sentimental too. She's not so bad. It's not that she's just lazy. I don't know, it was like all over the map. Didn't really know what to make of it, but it wasn't bad either. It was like interesting. And I guess that's kind of how it all boils down to with this series. Just earlier in this video, I was complaining about Embers being too formulaic and too by the book. I guess what the difference is that the formula that I thought Ichi the Witch was aiming for is not really by the book. It's something that we see very, very rarely in Jump. A true fantasy world that feels like a fantasy world. It was kind of like a promised thing that I was very excited for. But at the same time, I do appreciate it when series lunge in strange directions, when they keep the reader guessing, when I don't really know where it's going to go next. So I do appreciate that too. I wouldn't say any of the subversions and the rapid adjustments are bad at all. All of them were quite interesting and compelling in their own way. Just weird. It's just really hard for me to kind of get a bead on where this is going. Anyways, we will give it an A+ for the month. Still really great stuff. Still one of my favorite things in the magazine. Just excited to see where the heck it's going to go. I hope it has a long, long run, and it just has time to do everything it wants, you know? Sure, have all this nonsense. Sure, have subversions and arc cancellations, but get to the hunting later. Hunter x Hunter is certainly not fucking about hunting anymore. When was the last time we saw anybody fight a beast and instead of just negotiating by calling people on the phone for 13 chapters in a row and playing a card game? If that's not going to be about hunting, can this please at least be about hunting instead? Okay, let's talk about the Elusive Samurai. Speaking of series that are really fucking weird right now, we continued for most of this month the side story, where we're basically just kind of checking in on all of the other courts across the country, figuring out where allegiances lie between a lot of established characters. We saw some betrayals, pretty major one where Tadayoshi betrayed his brother. Basically just sort of accounting for all sorts of elements in actual history, kind of giving you a montage of all of these happenings, kind of jumping to the point at which it becomes conceivable that it'll impact the main story. I think all very, very well executed. Quite hard to keep track of, if I'm being honest. There's a lot of stuff going on. But as I said, they do a good job of sort of resolving it in a way that you kind of get what that's going to mean for the story going forward. Oh, okay, now this guy's an ally. Now this guy's dead. Now these two guys aren't allies anymore. Everything else is like compelling and fun. Maybe fun isn't the right word, but interesting. But then you kind of always understand the punchline quite quickly. But that's not the weird part. Then that, in fact, is very by the book of the Elusive Samurai. That's kind of the bread and butter. Let's talk about the polygamy aspect. I was already surprised last month when they were like, also of historic note is that our main dude here is notorious for having like dozens of children throughout the land. And it's inconceivable that he could have had all of these with one woman. So we can only assume that he was like a huge playboy in this era and that he was just schmoozing it up with women from all over the place. And it's like really, like, it really shows a sort of commitment to history that this series has. Because I think obviously the easiest part is just to ignore this. Because you've had a protagonist that throughout most of the series was like 12. And you've never really gotten into like sex at all. Which is pretty reasonable for a manga running in Shonen Jump. A magazine aimed at like young teenagers. And me, apparently. So the fact that they were bringing that up at all, I was just like, wow, what? And then it got like way more explicit, like way more of a focus, that basically the latter half of all of the chapters this month, besides the final one, were about his 3 wives and their lovemaking and the arrangement that they make amongst themselves. It's really crazy. And then this development that he's basically kind of giving up on being the emperor, on bringing his clan back to rule, that he realizes that it's kind of a lost cause. And now he just wants to like live out the rest of his life for love and personal satisfaction and the happiness of his retainers and stuff. Again, which I'm sure is a move that is representative of what happens historically, but feels so at odds with like how a manga works. To basically have the protagonist be like, okay, it would be like Luffy, 190 chapters in, they're what, in the throes of Alabasta, and then is like, you know what, I don't really want to be the Pirate King anymore. Let's all just live happily. It's just so wild, and I really don't know how it's gonna kind of continue on past this point, when on so many ways like the emotional resolution is already here. I kind of went into this thinking, yeah, this is like a famous Japanese revenge narrative of a clan that was disgraced and betrayed, and then the sole remaining heir and his long journey of revenge, and it's gonna end with him cutting fucking Tadayoshi's head off. But is it? I don't know. I mean, I could look on Wikipedia, but I won't. I need to see what happens. But given all that, it was very surprising in the last chapter of the month when they just veered suddenly back into the main plot line. The intermission was over. Now we are going to see the Elusive Samurai and his allies raiding a castle where Fubuki, their former ally, is encamped. I guess, that's something that still needs to be resolved, obviously. And I suppose that was maybe like a deep hook they put in their interpretation of the plot, the character of Fubuki, as a way to motivate him carrying out this battle when it seemed like the battles were done. Unexpected allies of the weird elf-eared dude and his genetically engineered soldiers are their allies now. It's all stuff that really almost feels like the mangaka Matsui Sensei did not read the entire Wikipedia article before starting to write this, and is now just kind of getting to new paragraphs and being like, oh man, I made that dude so evil, and now he's their ally? Ah, shit. I don't know. It's all really strange, man. And the harem stuff, how explicit it gets, really shocked me. But it's nothing if not bold, and I really commend this boldness and this unflinching quest to just depict everything that happened in this man's life, regardless of how appropriate it is for the readership, regardless of how exaggerated it gets in the manga, to never leave anything off the table. And never before has like the forward progress of this manga been so uncertain to me. Are we close to the end? I don't even know. I'm very excited to find out, though. We're gonna give it an A+. Just really good stuff from the series. Again, it's not like it was like tantalizing for me. Let me make this clear. But I was just so shocked at like how extreme it got, and I gotta give it props for pushing some boundaries, I guess. I don't even know, man. It is what it is. Let's move on. Shinobi Undercover, much less boundary pushing. The last month introduced a character I really didn't like. This like Ikemen type that effortlessly woos women. Just kind of a gross character. And then this month they were like, oh, guess what? She's a girl. You got tricked. And I was like, well, that's still stupid. And the fact that they're kind of presenting it as like a punchline to make it seem more interesting or less stupid feels even more stupid than before. But that at least resolved that plot line, which I didn't like. And then we started a whole new arc. And I will say that this arc at least kind of feels like an arc. It has an actual like structure to it. They're raiding this compound. There's going to be enemies. There's multiple allies and multiple enemies, and they're going to have fights. And it had like a good sense of chaos, a good feeling of like multiple factors being at play, that our main character is somewhat distracted from needing to come up with a birthday present for the girl, the target that they're protecting, This whole like, oh, I have to be her boyfriend in order to protect her better. I'm gonna play the part of her boyfriend, and then the conflation of his real feelings and stuff. None of it is like that great, but at least there's like something there. There's something that's kind of infusing it with a bit more drama and sort of like a multi-layered thing. And then, we get into this arc and there's a bunch of fighting. And I think the fights in this series are like decent. Not really that interesting. They could be a little more ninja-y, I think. But good choreography, good action, good punching and kicking and feelings of actually taking damage and stuff. Sure, sure, sure. And then they kind of suddenly throw in, and I think they just throw this in now, the idea of a kekai, which is like a supernatural power that the ninjas have, and each person has like a unique kekai. I don't think they ever brought that up before. Am I crazy? Did I forget? Just now they're just like, well, guess what? There's this too, and I was like, oh, you guys are confident, huh? That's not something you throw in there if you think you're gonna get canceled soon. So I don't know. Maybe there's a long future ahead from the series. Maybe that was a desperation play. I wouldn't mind if it ended. if we were gonna start making cuts ourselves to Jump, I would have cut this a long time before Hakutaku. That's for sure. Just not that interesting. And unlike something like Astro Royale, where it's not that interesting, but they're at least like moving through to future stuff that could be interesting. This series just sort of feels like it's in a perpetual dead end. Like they have like one super strong guy that they kind of fought to a standstill that's gonna come back, but I don't really care about the main character's goals. They're just like trying to keep her safe. There's no like end point. It's just this constant barrage of threats that they're fighting off. Obviously they kind of want some progress to happen on like the rom-com front, that you think, okay, the end point is when they start dating or something. But like that's not very interesting either. I don't think that's been very well established. I don't know. Yeah, it's just spinning its wheels. I'll give it a B minus. Not that much I liked. All right, Blue Box. Good stuff this month. My gosh. I talked at length last month about how I thought Shinatsu Senpai was going to lose the big basketball game, that she was going to be able to come to peace with her basketball career and win or loss, be satisfied. But then she wins. She actually wins after one more chapter of cliffhanger. One more chapter of just Omega climax where both her and Yumika are like battling at full power. It ends, and even though every story predicting technique in the book would suggest that Shinatsu would lose, she wins in a moment that feels like truly transcendental, like she beat the logic of the story itself. She's going to Nationals, she's going to the Winter Cup. We're gonna see that. That was so exciting for me. That was so cathartic and powerful. And like I said, it kind of speaks to a like further transcendence, a further glory, a further emotional catharsis and excitement. Because it's like, I said this before, this was sort of the reason I was most convinced she was going to lose, is that she had all the big emotional moments in that game. She came to peace with Yumika's role in her life. She came to peace with understanding what basketball means to her. She resolved the situation with her dad. Her dad came to cheer with her. That was like solved. Unless maybe she's got a problem with her mom too. It's kind of like, what's left? She's had all these revelations. And one can't really imagine a depiction of sports in this series, like watching her play basketball, but it's like head empty. They have to cut to some sort of internal dialogue. There has to be some sort of revelation over the course of the match. She has to grow further as the result of things happening. And so it's like, it's not so much that I think they're going to fail. I think they're going to really rise to the occasion and succeed. And that they're basically making a promise to you that as impactful and as beautiful as that match was, they're going to top it. Nationals are going to be even crazier. And it's like, I think they can do it. And the feeling of seeing her win and knowing that those two things go hand in hand is just so exciting, and something that I think is very, very unique to manga. That sort of like excitement and promise of future arcs that get stamped onto the plan in that moment, in that revelation of the score, of seeing them win. Do you understand what I'm saying? Is this crazy? Am I rambling? It's just so cool to me. Just like I just think that's such an amazing feature of the medium. That's so exciting. It's like in One Piece when they're like, we're gonna sail to Elbaf. More on Elbaf later, obviously. I don't know. Really good stuff. And then after all that, really fun little 2-chapter arc where they're all playing doubles, and there's kind of some mixed couple awkwardness, some really good comedy moments, some fun around Taiki playing badminton with his left, and everybody else not being so good at badminton. Just really fun stuff, but also like a very cute moment where they have like a lot of appreciation for each other, where they come to understand what the other one sees in them all the more. There's a really great scene where there's one guy who's what's his name? He's the guy that's like a little douchey, but maybe just a little like awkward too. That's always kind of saying things that are a little inappropriate. I like that character. What the frick is his name? He's that guy's little brother. Anyways, he just straight up asks Chinatsu-senpai, hey, would you have liked Taiki if he wasn't good at badminton? Like, let's say he's still working hard. Let's say he still comes to morning practice all the time. But he just sucks. He just never gets good. Would you still like him? And she's like, yeah, I think so, but I don't know. Let's not think about that. And I was like, man, that's so honest. That's, like, so true. Like, I think, I don't know. Like, people being good at stuff, that is attractive. But really, it's the hard work that's attractive, and it's what it signifies about your character, not just about, like, your innate talent or whatever. I don't know. I just found that really interesting, really authentic, really good stuff. I'll give it an S- for the month. Man, especially just winning the basketball game. Oh, that felt so good. Those are the moments. Those are the moments that make sports manga so great. All right, let's continue the praise. I'm not kidding, with Due's Exorcist, which was cooking this month on a level it has never cooked before. We were talking a lot last month about, like, in the end, this is like a light novel harem series that just has some of the trappings of Battle Shonen to, like, sneak into the magazine, but really it just wants to operate as, like, light novel harem. But occasionally it does have an arc that resembles structurally and in terms of emotional climaxes and stuff a Battle Shonen arc. And they kicked off another such arc that, like, really felt like an arc where, like, a sequence of things was going to happen that impact each other, and there would be a sense of setting and multiple characters converging on the setting, each with their own goals, and conflict that emerges from that, where fights become set pieces to resolve different conflicts. You know, the definition of a Battle Shonen arc. They were succeeding at that. They were able to create that. And that, to me, because I read a lot of Battle Shonen and I enjoy it, it's one of my favorite genres, and I do not read light novel harem series. It's one of my least favorite genres. That, to me, was immensely preferable. And in this month, they went even further in actually writing an arc where actually interesting things happen. They had a fight with choreography, where the fight wasn't just sort of an excuse for the main character to get really beaten up and to need to get saved and to think about girls or whatever, but like a fight that was, like, enjoyable as a fight, which they don't really seem to care to do a lot of the time, but a fight that actually had a sense of, like, push and pull, some tension, some ambiguity, and true choreography, like characters punching and kicking each other in an interesting way. The fight concludes. There's an intriguing development, a mystery, where a character is introduced whose role and allegiance is a little ambiguous to us. There's some stupid aspects of it for sure. There's, like, a little fan servicey scene, and it's not even the fan service itself that bothers me. You know, there's a lot of series I enjoy that are stuffed full of fan service, it's like the weird fetishy like mommy pandering of it. Basically, like my my fetishes and my fan service are noble and dignified and on the path to a righteous life. Whereas the fan service in this series pulls you deeper into degeneracy. I'm not even kidding. This is the worst part. Is I sincerely believe that. Except it would take me like an hour to explain why. And we'd end up stumbling into some sort of psychological pseudoscience on the way, almost certainly. But yeah. And also a stupid situation where it's like, basically we introduce this character who is forced to train small children ruthlessly, brutally, that leads to their death if need be. And then it's like, well, she feels really bad about it though. She thinks it's like fucked up, and she wishes she could stop. She wishes she could change the system, but she's like trapped down here doing it. So she's a good guy. She's gonna help out our main character. she's like a object of sexual affection, and provides you this like strange little mommy fetish moment, and then is gonna help out our main guy because she's actually like a good guy. And I was like, what? Like, maybe there's something I missed. But like, I don't think you can get away with that, being like, well, this is the slave master of the imprisoned children, but she's there reluctantly. She's shaking her head in disapproval as she makes children fight each other to the death. So actually, she's a good guy. Like, I sincerely think I must have misunderstood something or missed something. Because, like, there's no way you could get away with that. But whatever. The point is, it added a certain complication to the arc. It added, like, a story that happened within the arc. It added something that's, like, interesting and substantial. And then in the last chapter, they had some, like, legit, really cool, really scary settings. When they go into, like, the most inner sanctum of the family's mansion, and it's made up of, like, the flesh of, like, failed experiments, and they're screaming out in agony as they're stepped upon. I was like, oh, that's raw, that's metal, that's some nasty shit right there. It really felt like they were cooking, and I was like, why don't you just do stuff like this all the time if this is what you want to do? JJK is gone. There's a niche in the magazine for, like, grotesque horror stuff in parallel with, like, a battle shonen. Scrap the harem, put this in. But there was, like, a sense of intrigue and mystery. I wanted to know what was at the depth of that basement. I when they were talking about how, okay, well, this family is one of the pillars of the Exorcist Bureau, but it feels like maybe even more deeply and anciently and mysteriously they have this secret relationship with the Hyo itself. Like, maybe they're secretly on the other side. I was like, that's actually kind of cool. That has, like, kind of a creepy, haunting vibe. And just the whole thing had this, like, disturbingness to it. And when it felt like, you know, shit was really fucked, that both the Hyo demon was there and the kidnapped girl we like and her kidnapper were there, and it just sort of felt like most dire and hopeless, our hero showed up and swooped in, and I was like, oh, for the first time I can remember, he actually seems kind of badass in this moment. He's not just constantly getting his fucking ass beat and doing training arcs. I was like, wow, they're, like, actually kind of cooking. So, you know, a lot of stupidity, a lot of residual stupidity, not super impressive on a lot of fronts, but credit where credit's due. They were cooking on some of this stuff. So we'll give it a C+, which is not a high grade for me, but it is by far the highest grade this series has got. And I think if they keep moving in this direction, it could see some Bs. We could see some Bs with this one. Get some frickin' honey. See some Bs. I don't know. It's doable. It's doable. They just gotta kill the horniness inside yourself, please. And focus for a little bit. Or at least do the good fan service. The fan service on the path of righteousness. You know, what it comes down to, what it truly comes down to, I was cooking in the back of my mind. I let it ferment because I was like, there is probably some way I can word this succinctly. There's fan service that simulates the feeling of being loved, and then there's the fan service of that simulates the feeling of like touching a boob. Okay? And most stuff falls somewhere in the middle of these two things. But the more that it's on the side of fan service that makes you feel like you're loved, the more pathetic the series seems to me, and the less fun it is. And the more it just kind of feels like the person reading this is doing themselves a disservice. And the more that it is on the latter category, the where it's just like, oh my gosh, he might see boobs if this all goes to plan, and it's that kind of fan service, then it's like, I don't know, rock on. Okay, speaking of fan service, let's talk about Sid Craft, which is going in some strange directions. They're definitely trying to lean into kind of a greater, grander plot. I think this is partially hedge betting on maybe the series not lasting so long. But at the same time, it's just the sort of good thing to establish early in the series to create a sense of intrigue, to create a sense that things could matter more than just episodic adventures. So we've got this whole thing with Zero Craft, which kind of came to the forefront of this. The first kind of more substantial arc in the series around the cruise ship exploding was resolved, and then they tied that back into Zero Craft. But I think they're striking a good balance where they're not overly eager about this stuff, and they still manage to find time for like goofiness, character development, and yes, of course, fan service. And here, the fan service is much, much more on the visceral, sensual experience level. And they aim for like a variety of different sensory experiences that poor Sid Craft finds himself stumbling into, and that the reader is excited to imagine themselves in as well. It's the fan service 101. It's very different than reading and going, I wish I had GF mommy to nurse me back to health. So what happened this month? Yeah, the boat explosion wrapped up in a very bizarrely convenient manner. They have a silly fan servicey hot spring scene, whatever. There was a more kind of traditional mystery where they go to Sid Craft's parents' house to investigate Zero Craft. There they had Twister fan service, the excitement of playing Twister with an attractive woman. Yeah, I don't know, rock on. But again, kind of like further solidifying the character of this Phantom Thief lady as one of the kind of major love interests or whatever. The actual mystery of that chapter was extremely insubstantial, just silly cipher riddle. Nothing on the level of my beloved Cipher Academy, that's for sure. Stuff around Elio, who pretends to be a boy while assisting Sid Craft, but in fact is like a noble lady romance author person. And then he encounters her in girl mode, and it's like, okay, that's like another kind of setup that now, in his mind, these are two separate people, and he's going to keep running into girl mode Elio, and very nonsensical stuff with some good punchlines. The final punchline especially I thought was great. Just a good little anti-climax kind of screw the reader joke. I don't know. It's all good stuff. And the last chapter especially, I thought, this is the form they need to be in. They're really cooking with this, where it's like a good, pretty straightforward little silly mystery that actually felt like a mystery, that actually had clues that, although I cannot imagine any reader picking up on first read, were there, and, you know, were actually drawn into the manga, and you could have thought of it later. With a very funny new character, the girl who really aspires to be a criminal mastermind, but is just so naturally good-hearted that everything she does turns out to be good and favorable to Sid Craft. Just this, like, recurring type of character writing where it's like, they really want to be X, but they just have this overpowering natural disposition to be Y. That's good. That's funny. That's ripe for a lot of material. And then the last chapter, its fan service was Lips fan service. So the fixation on the mouth of Flamberry, because she gave him mouth to mouth before, and now he's really preoccupied with that. See, that's what Jump fan service is all about. It's like specific things to focus on, like the sensory experience of how they look or how he imagines they feel or whatever. I really sound like a pervert talking about this stuff at length, but truly I am an academic. I am merely trying to point out patterns. But yeah, pretty solid stuff. We'll give it a B for the month. I feel like it's spinning its wheels a little bit. None of the Zero Craft stuff has been really interesting yet. And a lot of the little mystery adventures, I think, kind of fail to be true mysteries, which is disappointing. But really, in the end, it just wants to be another kind of fan service harem rom-com, like We Can't Study. And the mystery stuff is just sort of set dressing. So it's like this sort of inner conflict in balancing those two interpretations of the series, I think, is not doing itself any favors, but maybe it'll settle into a groove. Like the latest chapter, I was like, you can just make chapters like this. That's great. Like that made me very happy. That would be a very fun series to read. Okay. Now let's talk about another comedy, the Super Psychic Policeman Chojo. With these really episodic gag manga, I feel like I can't really do much besides just sort of summarize each of the chapters and be like, yeah, some of them are good, some of them are bad. Because it's like gag manga, right? It's hard to talk about the overall plot direction or things like that, themes and storytelling or whatever. So yeah, first one, we have the super perverted kid. Ends up being cool, and they need to pull him back to his perverse roots. Actually very funny. Just such an absurd setup, and I really liked the way they depicted his coolness. I found very funny. Then we had a crossover from the author's previous series. I really love when manga do this. I think that's just such a fun way to kind of celebrate your own work and your own accomplishments. And even though I'd never even heard of that series before, I did find it very fun and very funny. It was fun to kind of infer what that series must have been about. Then a chapter that I found a little more like trite, a little more like just going through the motions, where they do personality tests that suggest that Ponfer and Chojo deeply secretly love each other. And I was like, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying that they would even get flustered about this. And then it just felt like very by-the-book gags around like being self-conscious of these feelings and self-conscious of one another. But then the last chapter where Cop Bot is trying to suck up to the chief and they go golfing together, and then Chojo comes along and ruins stuff. It's pretty fun. So, you know, the chapters range from like fun and truly funny to not so interesting premise-wise and not so funny. But it's a pretty narrow scope. Like, the highs are great, or the highs are good enough, and the lows are still good enough. It is what it is. We'll give it an A-. I am really liking this series. I hope it goes for a while. I just love gag comedy, because I have the mind of a child. Let's talk about more gag comedy with Roboco. Again, the ones that are focused on like the characters' sort of romances and stuff typically hit a little bit less for me, just because I feel like the humor is more by the book and it's less wacky. But the first one where they're trying to do a double date and then it just ends up being Bondo and Gorilla and what's her face, the girl that has a crush on Gorilla. I found that very funny. Again, just this whole bromance between Bondo and his friends, I think, is both very funny and very heartwarming. So that was good. And I like that it had a little sentimental thing at the end. Roboco's art show was a lot of fun. Kind of the typical jokes, you know. Roboco's strange artistic sensibilities. And then also just the jokes around modern art of what is interpreted as outsider art. The very classic joke that everybody does of, wow, this is brilliant. This is the most inspired piece in the entire gallery. What? That was just the trash I had left over from lunch. I just had set it there. That's not a piece. What? How many times have you seen that joke? Should really figure it out. I'm sure there's like a TV tropes page, but sure. A chapter where you find out that Bondo and his friends run Bermuda Jump, which is the in-school manga magazine satirizing both the manga industry and publishing, and then satirizing its own depiction of Jump, that they have their own little middle school versions of everything that they saw at the main Weekly Shonen Jump office, and the chapters where Ruri is getting serialized and stuff. Really, really great stuff there. I found it very funny, just very stupid. All the series parody stuff really hits for me. And then at the end, of course, we had Roboco's art again, which always cracks me up. And then the latest chapter of the month, definitely my favorite on quite a few different levels. Basically, the gang goes to a bathhouse and encounters a sauna for the first time. Because I guess saunas are really kind of catching on in Japan more lately than ever before. And I think this chapter is like a genuine attempt to teach kids about what fun there is to be had at the bathhouse. What is the appeal of it? You know, I would imagine the current generation of Japanese youth doesn't go as often. I think it's just less common in Japan in general. So it's like the author's like genuine plea for kids to check it out and to have a good time and to understand why it is that people go to these places. And then so it has like etiquette tips. Here's what you're supposed to do. Here's what the different baths are for. If you don't like this one, try this one. Make sure not to do this. Make sure not to do that. And I'm like, you know, it's kind of nice that Roboco, despite being like the stupidest series in the magazine, despite being the goofiest and most irreverent, and moments like this, or like the fishing chapter, or like a few of these other kind of hobby-centric chapters, really does like understand its audience and makes like a genuine attempt to teach them something and to open up their world to include new experiences and stuff. It's like, oh, that's really nice. That's really nice. The sauna gets really into the idea of totono, which is the Japanese term for the pleasure experienced after contrast bathing. Contrast bathing, if you don't know, you do something really hot, like a sauna or a hot bath. Then you do something really cold. You take a plunge in a cold tub for like 20, 30 seconds. And then you do something neutral. You just kind of sit outside for a bit. And this activates all sorts of crazy brain chemistry. Once you've done a few loops and you experience this overwhelming sensation of bliss called totono in Japanese. I don't know if there's an English word for it, but I've experienced it before. I've done this before. It's awesome. I really do recommend. It may not sound so pleasant, and the first couple loops, like, you're gonna feel like you're dying. But if you can hack it and you can get through to the other side, it actually does feel fucking amazing. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool that like they're spreading the good word of this in manga. It had already come up in One Day Outing Foreman. There's a Foreman chapter where they do contrast bathing and they love it and they experience Totono. So I was kind of like, whoa, cool. Like Roboco is doing a chapter on this too. It's just sweeping the nation. Maybe there'll be a Witch Watch chapter about it at some point. Whatever. And then on top of all of that, they make the entire thing like an extended JJK parody, where Roboco is using all sorts of JJK techniques, and they talk about the sauna as if it's a domain that they entered. It's great. This is great stuff. Great, great, great chapter. You're gonna be getting an A+ for the month. Really, really good stuff. Love me some Roboco. Can't wait for the movie. I hope I get to see it. I hope it comes to North American theaters for like me and no one else to watch. Alright, let's talk about Sakamoto Days, which is continuing this flashback adventure where Sakamoto first meets Shin. He's off to kill Shin's dad. Shin feels all sorts of different types of ways about it. And they end up on this cruise ship that is rigged to explode, with all sorts of other crazy stuff happening. Crazy stuff indeed. I think this month had a really nice balance between kind of like an emotional grounding of Shin's character, him coming to understand his father better, coming to terms with how shit his father treated him, but how maybe there was some element of kindness within it. All of this kind of coming to a head At the same time as just like really crazy fight scene between Sakamoto and Shin's dad's assistant dude. Just like classic Sakamoto Days stuff. What are some of the ones? Maybe this was in the last month of chapters, I don't remember, but when they shove the dude into the piano and then they both start hammering on the keys so the hammers hit him, or when Sakamoto hits a dude so hard that he flies all the way up a water slide, or when Sakamoto is trying to shoot a dude underwater, but the slowness of bullets and water is going to make it ineffectual, so he blows bubbles and then shoots the bullet through the bubbles. It's crazy. And then the way they stop the boat at the end, using the helicopter as like a rudder or a propeller. I mean, it's freaking ridiculous. It's all the stuff that I love most about the series, and just the way they so naturally switch gears into this sort of crazy over the top action movie type battles. I just love. I think it's the thing that the series is absolutely best at. And it's like really funny to me too. The actual diegetic situation here is that Shin and Sakamoto are having this moment in the JAA prison, right? Where they're remembering how they first met, and Shin is like coming to this revelation. And then it's like kind of the story that they're telling each other. It's like, can you imagine Sakamoto? And then I punched the guy and he went all the way up the water slide. Yeah, I remember that. Well, I was in another room, but you told me about that. I was talking to my dad, and we were having a heartfelt conversation. Like, it's just extra funny knowing that it's a flashback, I guess. Oh, and then they also have kind of some intrigue, some greater lore of the series around the JAA orphanage, all the strangeness that emerged from that with frickin' X and all of his associates. They kind of hint at a little bit more there. Not in any kind of mind-blowing way, but enough that it all feels like big interconnected, one big picture. Really good stuff, really good little flashback arc. Again, I'm just loving the pacing of this series, that they're taking the time to do stuff like this. The whole JA jail kind of felt like a side quest to begin with, and now there's a substantial flashback within the side quest. It just proves that the series has a lot of confidence that it can keep running for a long time hence, remain one of the great pillars of Battle Shonen and Jump. Really good stuff. Give it an S- for the month. Oh, man. Hold on a second. This is a long one. This is longer than most of my my Jump videos. Hee-haw. Just wanted to check Discord messages. Yeah. One Piece. What did I... What could I say? Really, what can I say? I've already said a lot. You can go watch the individual chapter videos, but they did a lot this month. We got one of the most substantial and mind-blowing lore expansions and revelations in the entire history of the series. So much to unpack. I still want to try to make a video unpacking it at some point. What's great for me is that it already meshes in with all of my existing theories on how this series went down. I think I'm just correct about everything at this point, which is a great feeling to have, and that this major revelation only confirmed it more. We introduced an amazing, awesome old man character that One Piece already has like a dozen of. Here's another one, and he's got an amazing meta lore in terms of how we have encountered him before and how he was presented to us, and then just this awesome surprise of like, oh, guess what? And also he's like gonna be a substantial character in the main series. Beautiful. And then on top of all of that, 2 new amazing characters introduced whom I love dearly. The designs are great. The designs are crazy. Can't wait to see them in action. Just like 1,000 chapters in, still being able to come up with totally creative characters like this that you're just so excited to see more of. Yeah, I don't know. It gets an S+, which I'm sure is no surprise. But I can't begin to express, beyond what I've already expressed, how much I'm enjoying this arc. Can't wait for more. Kagurabachi really impressed me this month too. This whole showdown at the hotel where they are trying to reestablish the seal on Samura's daughter's memories. A real kind of classic confrontation. They're trying to hold out on the roof until the seal is complete against seemingly an endless wave of both mooks and skilled opponents. What impresses me most, the battling is good. The kind of lore buildup is good. I think this is a really well motivated situation. The stakes are high and very clear and immediate. All of that construction is really good. I was also very impressed with the injection of the ordinary kid at the end, her classmate that takes it upon himself to follow her when she's rushed out of school, and manages to overcome all the violence around him and make it all the way to this kind of like final confrontation. Again, I think the elements of the series where it kind of shows like the normal world and how all of the insane things happening in the main plot kind of spill over and are witnessed and observed and interpreted by ordinary people, I think is really, really interesting. And this was just another great moment of it. Same with the final twist of Samura's daughter kind of like awakening to her genetic instincts. I was like, okay, this got potential. That was a nice little twist. Could be cool, could be cool. All that stuff was great. What impressed me even more than all of this, though, was just the thematic richness. This arc has really, really confronted, like, how brutally sad the lives of almost all the main characters are. The positions that they've put into where they have just so much blood on their hands. They've killed dozens, hundreds, out of necessity, sure, but just the feeling of like no other life being possible. The contrast between our main character and one of the primary antagonists of that arc, the kid that wanted to be friends with him because he felt like they had similar lives, and then Samura, her daughter, or Samura's daughter, I mean, who should have had a normal life, that was having a normal life, and then is suddenly kind of pulled into this parallel existence that she could have had, where she as well was a killer. She also was in danger all the time. I think it's all like really interesting, and that they're doing a great job of kind of weaving all of this thematically. Just like very smart observance of not just kind of the characters on a behavioral level, but getting into their psychology, getting into how would they really feel about these situations, and then how are those feelings kind of parallel with one another. Really, really good stuff. And then on top of that, just like the sadness that emerges. This rich sadness that pervades all of this arc, this feeling of hopelessness, of like a lost innocence, a lost youth. I think it's really well expressed and not something that we see in manga very often. Thank you again to the commenter. His username I always forget and never think to make a note of for these videos. But they left a really good comment about Kagurabachi, as always, talking about the influence of like Western directors on the manga. The author of Kagurabachi, Hokazono Sensei, is a big self-proclaimed Tarantino fan and a fan of other Western directors. And it's like, I think this is where it's reflected most. It's definitely reflected like stylistically and in the construction of the action scenes and stuff. But in this kind of like melancholy, in this feeling of just sort of emotional desolation, where as badass as everything is, and it's not like they're skimping on the badass, there's an even greater feeling of just futility, a kind of nihilistic sense, that doesn't feel like the end. It doesn't feel like a dead end for the series, but it's just sort of the tone it's at now that I think it's going to triumphantly kind of rise from, which is going to be amazing. So yeah, really impressed with all this stuff. Very, very solid right now. I'm giving it an A, and you might think from all of that praise it should be even higher. And it's hard for me to articulate exactly what I think it's lacking right now. Not even that it's like lacking anything, like A is a great grade, but it's like, it just needs like, there's some secret spice that I feel they've got in the jar, but they've yet to shake on top, that's really gonna clutch it for me. And I'm not even sure what it is. It's like the action sequences are good, there's lots of little twists, lots of interesting developments. I guess maybe it's kind of like in the world building and stuff, like I just haven't been super gripped by the feeling of like, ooh, I can't wait to see that character in action yet. Maybe, yeah, maybe it's that general sense of scale or something. I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, nothing wrong with it at all. Doing well. I'm excited to see how it can keep kind of growing and encapsulating more deep thematic richness and capturing more of my imagination. All right, let's talk about Hima-ten. This is a series that I was kind of down on for a while. I felt like it was getting very stupid, very fan servicey, very trite and uninteresting. But this last month, I think they started kind of pulling the ship around. I think the mode in which this series works best is just like cuteness. A cuteness around not being able to express your feelings, not being able to fully understand your feelings, feeling jealous, feeling flustered, feeling ambitious. You know, the positives and negatives of an uncertain crush. The more it can kind of hone in on that, and the less that it's about fan service and bullshit and whatever. And for the record, when we're talking about the different kind of the spectrum of fan service, I do think this is on the good fan service side. It's not on the pathetic fan service side. But even then, I think there's just other modes that the series is a lot better in. And a lot of them are on display this month. The date at the amusement park, it's just cute. I don't know. Like, it's just a lot of cute moments and some moments of sentimentality and some moments of character depth and stuff. In general, I thought the character of Kana was, like, very blatant and uninteresting. But they enriched her a little bit. They brought out some depth with her. The stuff around their moms and just sort of the embarrassment and awkwardness of meeting a girl you're into's mom, and just these kind of fun little situations that emerge during the parent-teacher conflicts. It's great. Cleaning Kanai's place, Kano-chan's place. It's great. It's great. I don't know, it's just nice. It's just cute stuff. And then in the latest chapter, kind of the inverse, he goes over and cleans her place, and then Himari is jealous, but she can't really put into words what makes her jealous, and she acts a little more bold and tries to make more of a connection with him because she's trying to resolve these feelings. I thought that was just really well expressed. I think it takes a feeling of jealousy. It doesn't blow it up into something unrealistic. It doesn't force drama out of it. But it just sort of explores in this nice little slice of life how those feelings manifest in like a really realistic, down-to-earth way. In a way that's like really cute. In a way that just makes the characters feel very endearing and likable. And not just sort of vehicles for fan service or drama. So yeah, I think the series has really regained a lot of footing for me. I think in this last month, they've really understood that a lot of that other stuff they were doing was unnecessary and actually kind of devalued the characters. It felt like they were going back to kind of the core of what made the series feel like it had potential in the first place. A cuteness. There's no other word for it than that. So we'll give it a B+. Definitely climbing back up in the grades. I hope we see more of this. I hope it just remains this very light, slice of lifey romance of just slowly kind of uncovering and unpacking your own feelings and acting on them. All right, I think this is our last series, but it's oh my gosh, excuse me. It's one that's in a really weird spot right now. So I love Akane-banashi. If you've been watching these videos, I praise it to the high heavens every single time. And this will be no exception. I think this run of chapters was still very good, very compelling, on a moment-by-moment basis, very emotionally resonant and interesting, with a lot of very unexpected twists. But on another level, this was the first month where I felt something besides just like an unshakable faith in the good storytelling abilities of the creators. Up until this point, I really felt like every choice that was made on kind of the macro story structure level was great, like interesting, and very like sensible, where very quickly, and this is a compliment. It's not to say, oh, it was predictable, oh, I could see things coming. But it felt very intentful, you know? Every arc, every performance, every development, every twist, it was like, aha, I see. This is going to like help Akane do XYZ. This is going to teach Akane whatever. And it all had this like great sense of purposefulness that just really, really impressed me. As somebody that reads a lot of manga, I would say the greatest sin that most manga commit is just like an arbitrary feeling where suddenly the rudder gets veered in another direction, maybe because of reader feedback, maybe because of editor intervention, whatever. And suddenly they're just doing something and it feels like there's no reason for them to be doing it. So many manga succumb to this. I see it time and time again. And in this month, I think for the first time, I was like, huh? We're doing what now? So basically, we have a 2-year time skip. Okay. Already a move in a lot of manga that signals kind of desperation, maybe, or just sort of doing something for the sake of doing it. It's not often that you really kind of justify a time skip with truly making it interesting. So already I was like, okay. Then we find out that Akane went to Paris, that she's been training in Paris for a few years. But it's basically as soon as we found that out, she's back to Japan. And it just felt so awkward and sudden and not really built out in the way that everything else in the story had been. Of course, I was interested, and the scenes of her in Paris were cool. It had a nice conveyance of like the different vibe and the language barrier and blah blah blah. And then yeah, suddenly we're in this like comeback performance, and I'm like, okay, I can kind of understand this on like a greater macro story level, where it's like Akane was really riding high for a while, and then even with her master being hospitalized and having to switch schools and all of that, it wouldn't really make sense for that to like truly knock her back, you know? Like she was devastated, but it would have been really out of character and out of the tone of the series for her to wallow in it and go, maybe I have to quit Rakugo or have some bad performances or something, okay? So it would have just sort of been like, oh, okay, well, her master got hospitalized, but she's still doing great, which would have really kind of ruined the impact of it. It wouldn't have really felt like anything had changed at all. And to do a 2-year time skip, it wouldn't have made any sense for anything less than, oh, and now she's even more popular, and she had a great 2 years, and she did all sorts of great performances. So it's like, if you want to have her kind of like become the underdog again and become this sort of like unknown quantity again, where she's having to kind of battle to prove herself, there needed to be something, and for there to be significance to like Shiguma being hospitalized, and it's like a major disruption in her life. Her forward trajectory hasn't been quelled, but certainly got shifted. There needs to be something. And I think this very, very completely checks off all of those boxes and puts us into the situation that they wanted to arrive at. Akane is an unknown quantity again. She's an underdog. Nobody knows the true heights of her potential. She has to kind of reintegrate into the world of Rakugo. She has to start down the same path that she was on before. But it's like, in order to achieve this, they did it in such a jarring, strange way. And I can only hope that it gets paid off more and more. Like, already we had kind of a justification for why she was sent to Paris to train, and a little exploration of what she learned in Paris. And that's cool, but it didn't feel substantial enough for such like a radical story departure. I did really, really like the stuff around how the kids, the Zenza, Akane has like a really bad reputation with them, and they think she's like hungover, and they think she's washed up, and she's gonna phone it in, and blah blah blah. I was like, that's very interesting. Again, that's something that this whole kind of contrived situation has resulted in that they're using to good effect. But it really does feel contrived, and it doesn't feel as fleshed out. It feels like kind of an artificial story injunction to get us from point A to point B, rather than everything having that sort of like natural, purposeful intent. Yeah, it's not even so much that it's not purposeful, it's that the purpose is like too bare. It's like too purposeful. It's only purposeful, and it doesn't feel fleshed out and substantial as part of the story, at least yet. So we'll see, we'll see. It's tough because like it's not that I dislike it for any of that. It is like a little disappointing and confusing, but the moment to moment stuff is still so great. Her performance of the yawning school is phenomenal. Just the sense of aura around her that's been reestablished is phenomenal. The position that they awkwardly maneuvered the plot into, I think, is really, really exciting and has a ton of potential. So, like, it's all good. I'll still give it a good grade. We'll give it an S. Like, that's a really good grade. I think it was, like, killing it this month. But it's just on that meta level. It was just very shocking. And it's almost like it felt like it was trying to be shocking. It felt like it threw in a trip to Paris and a time skip just to rattle you, just to keep you on your toes. And it feels like that's beneath this series. It feels like this series is just so freaking good. It doesn't need to employ anything cheap like that. And that they could have gone about this in a more graceful manner, I would hope. I don't know. Everything is lined up though now. We had the Shiguma flashback, which was great, but I also had reservations about. And then we had this bizarre time skip thing, which was great, but I had reservations about. And now I think the path is wide open for any number of plot lines to emerge, none of which I feel like I would have reservations about. But we'll see. We'll see. Still good stuff, obviously. All right. This was last month's tier list. Very, very top-heavy time for the magazine. I'm very, very happy with Jump lately. This is this month's tier list. Even more top-heavy, I would say. Huge concentration around the A+, with, I can't count, 4 series in the S tier. That's phenomenal. I don't know. I'm very happy with Jump right now. I'm excited to see where these new series go. Like I said before, it feels like we had a kind of minor extinction event with both Undead, Unluck, and Yokozuna family ending. And now another short-lived series ended. I hope there's no more casualties for a while, but we'll see. I think there's a few that might be on the table. And yeah. Let's see what happens next. It's Shonen Jump, baby. Next month will mark... No. 2 months. We're 2 months out from doing a year's worth of this. And I'm still having a blast. I hope you're having a blast too. Okay, see ya.